Days of Awards.
5 days of awards.
Inspirations and solutions.
Inspirations and solutions.
RadioWeek.
RadioWeek. 5 days of awards.
5 days of awards.
Inspirations and solutions.
Inspirations and solutions.
RadioWeek. And hello, Fiorenza, Margaret, and
Good afternoon.
Nicholas.
Good afternoon.
Hello. Well, this is the last day of our Radio Week in English with RedTech Tribe. And let me just show you something that you will certainly see later on and receive. It's our first magazine that is coming out soon. Paper version is available under subscription, and digital version is free. Margaret and Fiorenza, that's our first, with a lot of articles. Our partners, we have to thank our partners. So you will see who is who really trusted us for the start of this great project, which we hope will last for a long time. Margaret.
That's right. Thank you. We've got a great lineup today. The theme is podcast generation, and we're going to welcome Ross Adams. He's the CEO of Acast in Sweden. And we're also welcoming Jared Edwards, who's going to be with us in just a minute. And he's the founder of Podcast Radio in the UK. And we're going to find out what he's doing with his station and how he's combining podcasts with traditional radio. So shall we start with Ross Adams, Philippe?
Yes, exactly. We'll start with Ross Adams. And then at 2:25, we have another RedTech talk on another stream, as always. And then we have another session, but this one will be in French. So the last English session will be at 2:25, and it will be this session with modern delivery solutions for podcasters and radio stations with Piero Rigolone that we know well. Okay, let's go with Ross Adam and the little message that he has to tell us. Let's go with. Sorry, this is not the right one. This is the good one. Let's go. Little music, and we start.
RadioWeek. 5 days of awards.
5 days of awards.
Inspirations and solutions.
Inspirations and solutions.
Keynote today.
RadioWeek.
For those who don't know me, my name is Ross Adams, and I am the CEO of podcast company Acast, which is a company founded in 2014 and finds itself today as the world's biggest podcast company. We call ourselves the engine that powers podcast creators of all shapes and sizes. And our fundamental belief is that podcasters should be empowered to find their audience and make money from their craft on their own terms and fairly. That means that we strive to be the most creator-centric podcast company, building the most innovative tools and services and products, allowing our podcasters to grow and monetize their shows to their full potential. So we're very happy to be here at Radio Week, and I can hopefully share some words of wisdom about the podcast industry with you. It goes without saying, as we all know, 2020 was not a normal year for anyone. But for podcasting, 2020 was also the year the industry proved it could handle anything the world could throw at it. How lucky are we? With listeners hungrier than ever for podcast content, whether they were looking for comfort, support, or just to get away from it with a good laugh, podcasts proved what a big role they play in everyday life for so many people around the world, even when life, as we know it, has been turned upside down. Podcasts can provide a friend in your ear during times of uncertainty and the sense of community that so many shows work so hard to create. It's been more important than ever, especially in the past year. Podcasts have offered the escapism and entertainment that people have craved at some of the most difficult times. We're incredibly fortunate that podcasting is predominantly a digital medium, so Acast products and services remained unaltered throughout the year. However, when the pandemic first hit, we recognized the impact this might have on the likes of advertising revenue and therefore in turn on our creators. So we immediately set about building something called the Supporter Tool, which is a product that lets listeners donate to their favorite shows, no matter what app they're listening on. We developed and released this new revenue stream for our creators from scratch and in record time in a number of weeks, and it was incredibly successful. And with that sort of innovation continuing throughout the year, 2020 ended up being actually a record-breaking one for us at Acast. On average, the 20,000 shows on the Acast network receive roughly more than 300 million listens around the world every single month. Looking back at the beginning of last year, just before the pandemic really took hold, that number was more like 180 million. So our listener base has almost doubled in a mere 12 months. Commercially speaking, since Acast was founded in 2014, we've managed to double revenue every single year, a feat achieved by no other podcast company. While 2020 was a more challenging one, especially with many advertisers responding to the pandemic by initially, in some cases, pausing some campaigns, we had a very, very strong second half of the year. We did a lot of hard work to restore advertiser confidence, and as a result, significantly increased revenue back to pre-COVID pace once again. Looking at the industry from a broader perspective, it's clear that many other companies are taking notice of podcasting's potential. Some of the biggest players in the digital world made huge acquisitions in 2020, including the likes of Amazon and Spotify, which suggests we're only just seeing the start of what podcasting has to offer. So the industry has proven its resilience and determination. More brands than ever are investing in podcast advertising, and more people than ever before are listening. It's safe to say 2021 is shaping up to be Acast and the podcast industry's best year yet. 2020 success and the success we see coming down the line in 2021 is also thanks to, of course, to the unbelievable reaction of our podcasters and how quickly they adapted to so many different challenges. Whether it was suddenly having to record from home or via Zoom, producing more content for hungry listeners, developing new formats to meet new needs, or starting a podcast for the very first time, creators took it all in their stride. And the number of podcasts on the Acast network grew by a staggering 141% as a result. It should go without saying that the podcaster is the most important, most significant player in all of this. They are the lifeblood, the beating heart of podcasting, and therefore must always come first. That was one of Acast's founding principles and something that has guided us in everything we've done since. The other principle was that we firmly believe and relentlessly champion the open ecosystem. Open podcasting is the bedrock of which the entire industry was built. It's an ecosystem that allows content creators to share their work with listeners everywhere across every podcast app and player there is. The magic of podcasting is in discovering a new show. You can't wait to share with your friends or following one for so long that you feel like you're part of the family. And all of that is made possible by the industry's open nature. At Acast, we call ourselves platform agnostic to reflect the fact that all the tools we create and all the partnerships and integrations work on any podcast listening platform there is. That goes for our approach to monetization too. Open podcasting doesn't necessarily mean all content should be free, but simply that all creators should be able to monetize their show in whichever ways suit them best. We don't believe that podcasters or listeners should be tied to a single platform, because being open is the only sustainable way to build our podcasters an engaged, consistently monetizable audience. But that open model is not one being pursued by all corners of the podcast industry. And more worryingly, not all the high-profile moves that were made in 2020 were done with creators' best interests at heart. We strongly believe that open podcasting, coupled with a creator-first mindset, is the best way forward for an industry experiencing such explosive growth. After all, you can have all the ad dollars in the world, but without podcasters and without their loyal listeners, there are no podcasts. It's crystal clear in our minds that ahead of everything else, we must bang the drum for all podcasters. We will continue to do everything we can to help them keep creating content and making money from it in an open, diverse, and inclusive podcast ecosystem. So if you work in radio, but you're interested in podcasting, or if you already have your own podcast, our door is always open. If you're an advertiser, come and speak to us about how podcast advertising can make your money work far harder and how it brings such strong return on investment for your campaigns. Or if you're right at the start of your podcasting journey, consider Acast as your first port of call. We work with a wide variety of extremely talented creators, and we're always on the lookout for more. from a bedroom podcaster learning the ropes, or a hobbyist passionate about a specific topic, to celebrities, influencers, and leading voices. The beauty of podcasting is that it's open to all. In fact, Acast Open is our product specifically for those looking to create their own podcast for the very first time, or to take the next step in their podcasting journey. We have 3 different tiers, one of which is completely free of charge. So do have a look, even if you're just starting to think about what your show might entail. Towards the end of 2020, we also launched a new collaboration with Patreon, the world's most popular membership platform, to give podcasters of all sizes even more options when it comes to making money from their content across every single podcast player and app. And if what I've said so far isn't enough, here's one last number for you. Since 2019, Acast has paid out more than €1 million to podcasters in France alone. And that could be you. Thanks very much. Appreciate the opportunity. Have a great day.
That was the message of the CEO of Acast. So I put your mic on, Margaret, and here is Gary Edwards. Gary, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Am I coming through loud and clear? That's the first question.
Perfect. Hi, Gary.
Yeah.
Thanks
Hi.
for joining us.
Great. No,
Okay,
great.
so before we just talk about what Ross Adam just said, and it's going to be very interesting to have your viewpoint on that. We're just going to give a RedTech award, Margaret, the first RedTech of the day,
That's right.
and which is, I think, which number is it? How many did we give already? There's 2 left, so there should be like
Yes.
9.
This is number 10.
Number
Then
10.
And then we've got one more a little bit later.
And we have one little later. So let's just launch the award, the RedTech award. I just check where I did put it. And I think that we will take it a bit later because I don't see the video here. So let's just take it after Gerard, and I will load it. So we have the award with the video, because I don't see it here and I don't know why, but it's the last day. So when it's the last day,
And we're live.
you always forget some things. So the 2 awards, I mean, they're ready, but I just have to load them. So I will leave Margaret, and I have one question, Gary, and then Margaret and Fiorenza will go on while I'm just loading the videos. You have a very original way of doing podcast, and Adam Ross was talking about the business model of podcasting. You are taking podcasts and you're just playing them live on a radio station in DAB+. And that's the project of Podcast Radio, which is really original. And can it be a business model also for podcasters?
You know what? We believe so. In fact, it has worked in year 1, importantly. But the first thing we noticed was what Ross was saying about being agnostic. Having your podcast everywhere is making it findable. And the big problem with podcasting is discoverability. Can your podcast be found, and does it stand out amongst all the others? And so we designed Podcast Radio as a tool to do just that, to get a podcast into more ears, and especially the ears of people who are willing to listen to new podcasts. A lot of companies might spend on Twitter or Facebook ads and target people who like podcasts and say, hey, have you heard our podcast? And it's good in some way, not so great, because yes, it lands at someone who's interested in podcasting, but are they willing to listen to a new podcast, or do they just love one only? And so anyone who comes and listens to Podcast Radio, whether it's on our radio channels using DAB across the UK, or whether it's on smart speakers, our own app, we get 125 countries regularly tuning in every month. No matter who or how they listen to it, a lot of people in one moment, because it's live and curated, are hearing a new podcast to them or new content. And it's all about tackling that discoverability problem using an old tool, really, radio, and the radio format.
Traditional radio, exactly. So what inspired you to launch this type of station podcast, promoting podcast exactly on traditional radio?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because we have to call it a station, but then when it's online, it's a platform. And then because no one else is doing it, it's something else, Podcast Radio. So we had to just choose a really simple name, Podcast Radio. And people seem to understand it. We launched it because I designed a couple of pure radio stations a few years back in the UK, But at the same time, I was a podcaster just on the side, seeing how it was going a few years before the big podcast boom. And I had a successful podcast that went into the top 10 in the UK. Now, that's not me blowing my trumpet, because as quickly as it looked successful and people were hearing it, it disappeared out of the top 10 on Apple. Nobody ever heard of it again. And because I designed radio stations and felt the power of mass media, you know, being available in a car without having to search for something, it's there, delivered to you, curated. Because I came from that background and designed radio stations, and because I'd felt the pain point of podcasting, you know, struggling to be found, I thought, surely there's an answer somewhere in here that connects these two tools. And we feel like it uses the facility of radio as well as radio can be used, you know, reaching out, broadcasting, and we just put podcasts on it. It sounds too simple, doesn't it? It sounds easy.
It sounds obvious, yes.
It sounds obvious, but sometimes the good ideas are. We think it's a great idea. Year one went really well. But the one thing podcast, you know, is really struggling with is the fact that more and more podcasts get created every day. You know, and that might be growing faster than there are listeners jumping on every day. And although it's a booming industry, it's saturated with content. And that is both fantastic because users have the choice of everything, but it also comes with its frustrations. When we designed podcast radio, we had the licenses, we had the channels, we were about to flick it on. People were saying, why? And the simple answer that we discovered was saying, have you put on Netflix, searched for 20 minutes and not watched anything? And everyone was putting their hands up saying, yeah, why is that? And the answer is there's too much in front of you. There's never a perfect program or film. Just like there's never a perfect podcast. However, we do know from our trials, when you start listening to just about any podcast, if it's well made, if it's passionately delivered, if it's in the right language, if it's in English for me, you know, you guys are all multilingual, and I feel embarrassed. But if it's in your language and it sounds good and the person is interesting, you'll give it another few minutes of a listen. And that's really what we're doing. We're delivering podcasts en masse using radio as well as all the other digital platforms, but we're delivering it in its most raw form of audio. You know, it's not a top 10 list that you read and think, is that something I will like? And then you click and you go and find it somewhere else on your favorite app. We're delivering it instantly in the right format, in what the podcast is. Don't get me wrong. We then offer Spotify, Apple, Google Podcast, Stitcher. And if your listener falls in love with the podcast they hear right there and then, the journey is instantaneous. They do 1 or 2 clicks from where they are, and they'll be listening to the full series of that podcast. And in that sense, we might be the first radio station that has ever said, if you really, really like what you're listening to, listen somewhere else. But year one showed us that if we do it well, and if we make that journey easy and we play great content, both the podcaster wins, the listener wins, and people come back to use the service over and over and over again.
So you're basically, sorry, Philippe.
No, go ahead.
So you're basically facilitating access to listeners. I mean, they just organizing it for them. They can find exactly what they want, easy, and that's cool.
Yeah,
what is
the question I have? Sorry, Margaret, is do you publish the whole episode of the podcast, or do you make extracts? Because radio is not the same timing. I mean, are you doing slow radio in podcast radio, or and the good thing with podcast as well is that you have very short formats and short podcasts that could be just 1 minute, like you could have in a radio station. So how do you program your podcast so that people can still be into I want to listen to this podcast, but maybe podcasts that are 30 minutes or an hour and a half? It's not a radio format. So are you changing the game with radio broadcasting?
Yes and no. And I'm so glad you asked. Yes and no. That's not the full answer. Don't worry. Believe it or not, we have a news bulletin on the top of every hour. We hit it 99% of the time. The reason being, and this is selfish reasons, we want the listener to be able to hear a podcast, stay up to date with the news. There's no excuse to go and listen to a talk radio station now that's live, because our news is updated every hour. We have a presenter after the news called a pod jock, one of which is a radio Hall of Famer in the USA called Gene Baxter. He's been from Kevin and Bean on LA's K-Rock. So we went and got really good people at what they do to make you want to keep listening. And what it's done is then you hand over to the podcast. And when the podcast is on and broadcasting, it's the podcast's content that is number one. It's about the podcast there and then. But to answer the question about programming, if we have the news bulletin at 2 minutes, a program for 38 minutes, the podcast, we have content back end, whether it's a 19-minute podcast to fill that gap with an introduction, or whether it's original interviews with podcasters, or whether it's our chart show, or whether it's a review show that we make. And believe it or not, we fill every bit that isn't a podcast with podcast-related content. And what it sounds like is just the most fascinating multi-subject and genre radio station. It's like speech radio without politics. And if you can picture where that goes, you'll be listening to someone talk about Roswell and aliens. Then you'll be listening to the reason money exists and your emotional response to money. Then a comedian will come on and tell you what their experience of COVID. And in between everyone, you'll either hear a news bulletin or someone telling you why you should listen to the next one. And believe it or not, if it's a 24-hour schedule, and interestingly, I think, Philippe, we play the same podcast at 4 p.m. on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, with a different episode in full. And the reason is we know radio is routine. People will listen at maybe 4:05. The next day, they might drop in on the car at 4:10. And we know with radio advertising, the more you hear it, the more you like it, the more you're introduced to it. And so we use both radio routine, podcast content, which really is amazing. And we then put it all together on a seamless platform 24/7. We think we've done it very cleverly, of course. The one thing we realized was podcasters did say, what if someone hears my content on podcast radio? Will they come and listen on Spotify or Apple? Will I still get the download? And that was the first thing we had to solve before we ever launched. And the simple answer was, just like a musician will put out a single and say, come and listen to my album, come and buy the album. We ask for a handful or a selection of episodes from each podcaster. And some have said, can I give you all my 110 episodes? And we say, no, give us 15 at most. And we'll introduce you to this schedule in about a month's time. For a month, you've got the 4 p.m. slot. You stand out more than any other podcast for that moment, for that 4 p.m. slot for the next month. It's all about you. And listeners will only ever hear 15 episodes on podcast radio. And that's why you then go to the website, go to the app, and then you follow it on your own choice with the Spotify, Stitcher, Deezer. We're just in conversation now with making podcast radio available inside of the apps. We're already inside Deezer. Now, all of a sudden, there's never been a radio station available inside a podcast app. So we're the first one. And it kind of bends the rules. Are we a radio station at that point, or are we not? But we are a curated 24/7.
Question now is just to listen to podcast radio. We have to go. We have 3 minutes left to the next session. So we really have to give it the two awards. Stay with us. The first award, RedTech Award. And this is Ferncast, Margaret. If you can just tell what is the software-based solution for the control.
Sure. Congratulations, Ferncast, Detlef. Basically, it's a software-based solution to control and manage the distribution of all types of audio, not just podcasting, but also, and it fits right into today's discussion that we're going to have on delivery solutions for both podcasters and radio stations. So again, congratulations to Ferncast for the RedTech Top Product Award.
And we go to the second RedTech.
Congratulations.
Telos Alliance.
Telos Alliance, the Quasar mixing console. This is a RedTech Tribe Choice Award, and it's for ergonomics. So basically, I know Telos put a lot of effort into making this a really sleek design, and our judges certainly thought so. Congratulations to Telos on the Quasar.
Gerard, thank you very much. We really have to rush to the next session because we have 2 minutes before we start. We'll be back with you later on RedTech Tribe. We'll certainly make a short story about what you're doing with podcast radio,
Yes.
because it's really great. Congratulations.
Lots of questions for you.
I bet.
And we
Thank
have a
you
lot
so
of
much.
questions. Thank you. Take care, and
Thank
see
you.
you
Guys.
very soon. And we just go to the next session. Fast.
Thanks.
Radio Week 5 days of awards,
5 days of awards.
inspirations and solutions.